welcome back to Let's Read Darksiders, the Abomination Vault by Ari Marmel. I'm BurningDogFace, and last time we saw a rare example of death completely screwing up, and as a result, everything he knew about the Grand Abominations, Hadrimon and Belisatra now know about the Grand Abominations. He's none too pleased about it either. So, let's get on with Chapter 19, and, see how he tries to deal with that. When most inhabitants of the many worlds, the myriad examples of sentience that had arisen across 1,000 domains, spoke of creation, they thought primarily of the Empyrean, the metaphorical tree of life. Thriving realms of light and life, uncountable in even an immortal's lifetime, sported angels, old ones, and animals in infinite variety. Broad enough, varied enough, for any race and every purpose was the tree of life. Yet it was not the full extent of creation, for all that many of its inhabitants might wish it were. Beyond the divide lay wholly half of existence, a dark and twisted mirror of the Empyrean, and all its wonders, the underworld, the tree of death. For every heaven, a hell. For the vibrant forge lands, the kingdom of the dead, vestibule to the well of souls, dominion of the Lord of bones. For Eden, the peculiar, almost nightmarish, semi-reality of purgatory. And for the many worlds of the old ones, in the deepest metaphysical bowels of the underworld, among the very roots of the tree of death, below even the darkest pits of hell, the abyss. If oblivion was nothingness made manifest, the abyss was darkness incarnate, shadow, not as an absence of light, but a black radiance of its own, death, not as an absence of life, but a cold and ravenous presence. It was from the depths of the abyss that the rampaging Nephilim had gained much of their power, and they fed the abyss in exchange. They fed it whole realms. The abyss had few, if any, to call its own. It was rather the graveyard of worlds, the final resting place of any realm well and truly murdered. Such dead worlds gradually but inevitably drifted from their cradles in the tree of life, and fell here to nourish the gnarled tendrils of the tree of death. Yet the abyss was not without some native life. Like any cemetery, it attracted vermin, scavengers, and predators, things that fed and thrived on the decay of worlds. Some dwelled in the void. Most made their homes in the dead and desiccated realms that made the abyss their final place of rest. And because the abyss had few rules of its own and corrupted those of the worlds it claimed, each of those realms and each of those creatures obeyed vastly different laws of nature from any other. Some were merely grotesque and violent, like the demons or the topography of hell writ large. Others were worse. This particular world was worse. The air, already hazy with an unidentifiable noxious fume, roiled and thickened before finally parting, almost sullenly, for the horseman's magic. Ruin and despair gradually appeared, a process far less comfortable for mount or for rider than it ever was in worlds beyond the abyss. Death and War sat rigid in their saddles, leaning slightly forward as though confronting a fearsome headwind. Of dust, oddly, there was no sign at all. This is... War was clearly taken aback. Death, who had thought himself prepared, found himself nearly as disconcerted. He had seen dead worlds in his time, that eldest of the horsemen, had in fact helped make more than a few of them. He had seen worlds burned to cinders and scoured of life, such as the one on which he made his current home. worlds blasted and blackened, barren echoes of the charred council's fiery domain, worlds of glistening ice and worlds of sterile stone. Never before had he seen a world infected. A gritty, almost scabby crust cracked and shifted beneath the horse's hooves, exuding a clear, vaguely sour fluid with each step. Scattered pits were literal gaping sores in the landscape, radiating a feverish warmth, wreathed in rot. The hills, of which several were visible before the cloudy air obscured the distance, were fleshy, bulbous, tumorous rather than geological, growing and shrinking in starts even as the horseman watched. The wind, though placid and weak, moaned with the voice of an old man dying. And death had finally identified the tang of the putrid air. Gangrene, bile, and the eye-watering breath of a mouthful of rotting teeth. "Welcome back to the home of the Rivaiim," Death muttered bitterly. "I don't understand," his brother said. "Even at our worst, the Nephilim never did this." "But we did." Death slid from Despair's saddle and knelt to examine the sickly earth. Not so much because he expected to learn anything, as because he felt he should. "We didn't just slaughter all life on this world. We corrupted it. We murdered the Rivaiim, yes, and then we compounded our sin by warping them into something they were never meant to be, something creation was never meant to contain. We planted the seeds of all this, brother, or first cultivated the pestilence, if you prefer that metaphor. It was here, waiting, and when the world slid into the depths, the abyss itself helped it to bloom. We did this. Perhaps the return of the Grand Abominations is no more than we deserve." "All right, enough of this!" War dropped from ruin, ignoring the faint trickle of pus oozing up from where his boots cracked the surface, and halted less than a pace from Death. "You've always had a morose streak running beneath your bitter sarcasm, but that only goes so far. Yes, this is horrific. Yes, perhaps we and the other Nephilim were responsible. But you're taking this personally, brother, and it's time you told me why." "It doesn't matter. No! You've been keeping your precious secret since we started this, and I've permitted it, but it ends now." Death rose, smoothly, lithely, from his crouch, so that the two riders stood face to face. "You've permitted it, War?" If the younger horseman felt any trepidation at that tone, he managed to keep it from his expression. "Yes, but no more. I need to know whatever it is you've kept from me." "No, you don't. Now step back." "No, Death. Step back. No." Death's uppercut did not merely lift War off his feet, it sent him hurtling up and back with enough force to shatter the ground where he finally fell. A pink froth pus puddled in the shallow crater, soiling the ornate armor and the crimson cloak. By the time he'd struggled to his feet, his jaw already coming over a mottled purple, Death had closed the distance between them. "Am I clear?" he demanded. War's hand clenched of its own accord. His entire body trembled with rage, but he refused either to lash out or draw Chaos Eater. "No." A second blow, this one to the chest, threw him back further still. Again he split the crust of the world with the impact, and again he staggered upright. This time, when Death approached, he held a harvester in both hands. "And now," he asked, "consider before you answer that I'm done with my fists." "So be it," War said, then paused to spit a mouthful of blood. "Cripple me, kill me, discard your greatest ally in this to keep your precious secret, because that's the only way you will." Harvester quivered. Death's eyes blazed bright enough to reflect in his brother's armor. And then he began trudging back towards the horses. A moment's delay, and War was on his heels. "You reminded me of me just then," Death said softly. "Well, of course." War managed a faint grin with his split lips. "Since you were behaving more like me, someone had to be you." Death's chuckle was one of courtesy, not amusement, but at least he managed it. "I do appreciate you keeping Ruin out of it. It was everything I could do. I'd not turn my back on him for a while were I you." Understood. He lay Harvester over Despair's saddle, then gazed over the leather towards the clouded horizon. "War, I did this. It wasn't you alone, Death. You told us that the Firstborn, I was one of their primary crafters. We certainly could not turn to the Makers for aid with this, so all of us with any skill were involved. You already knew, did you not, that it was I who imbued the power of the Nephilim into Harvester and Affliction, as well as some of our other ancient weapons? I was the nearest thing to a crafter, a maker, that we had, so of course I was involved in the birth of the Abominations. Even so, that hardly makes it your... It was my idea!" War, who had held fast against Death's earlier assault, fell back before the power of that declaration. "All of it," he continued more softly, "using the Rivaiim themselves as a basis for the weapons, feeding not only on the magics and creations they'd achieved, but all the potential they should have achieved, had we not exterminated them. My idea! Oh, I only helped craft a few of the Abominations personally. But that they exist at all is my responsibility. I rarely feel guilt for any of the countless lives I've taken, brother. I'm not certain I'm even capable of it any longer. But for this obscenity..." He turned, finally, away from Despair to face his younger brother. "So yes, I take this personally, War, because it is personal, and private. I have just trusted you, however reluctantly, with secrets that nobody else knows, not Strife, not Fury, not the Council. I don't believe even Samael or the Crow Father can possibly have discovered this. And I am asking you, without threat or demand, to keep it that way. And is this everything, then?" "Everything you do not know about me, not even a fraction. Everything you did not know about my involvement with the Grand Abominations? Yes." War, his features screwed tight in an expression of disgust, still managed to force through the faintest vestige of what might, under other circumstances, have been a smile. "And I see no reason I should ever need to speak of it, brother." Death clapped a hand on his companion's cloak-covered shoulder, then hauled himself back into Despair's saddle. "Come on, then. We've a way to go yet." The decayed beast set off at a brisk trot, War and Ruin swiftly pulling alongside. For a time, they rode in silence, each lost in his own thoughts. Eventually, however, when one of the nearby dunes split to reveal a weeping, bloodshot eye that stared at them as they passed, War spoke once more. "What you've not yet explained," he said, very deliberately not meeting that gruesome gaze, "is why we need ride overland at all. Why did we not just step into this world nearer our destination?" "You felt that abnormal pressure building around us as we crossed the Veil?" Death asked. "I did. Anywhere other than where we appeared and a few other specific spots, the resistance is even stronger. The Firstborn warded this world back when we were first creating the Grand Abominations. We left only a few entry points accessible. It's possible that this world's time in the Abyss has weakened some of those barriers, but then it's equally possible that it's made them dangerous and unpredictable. Not a chance I'd care to take." "Understandable. I thought you'd find it so." Long they rode, ignoring, as best they could, the bizarre horrors of this corrupt realm. The cracked and oozing terrain, smoldering beneath ruin's hooves. The ever-present stench of putrefaction, the shifting of the landscape as veins bulged from beneath the dead soil and boils the size of hills shriveled as they drained. On occasion, the shifting of the terrain suggested the presence of something else, some separate and distinct creature burrowing through the ground, but whatever it was seemed disinclined to emerge. Finally, the pair reined in their mounts in unison. "We're here," Death said. "I'd rather assumed," his brother replied. It almost appeared as though the world simply ended. A rough precipice dropped away until it was lost to the ubiquitous haze. It wasn't precisely jagged so much as torn. It looked less like the edge of an escarpment than the edge of a wound. Indeed, rubble accumulated along the rift revealed itself to be not rock, but dried and crusted secretions bubbling up from pockets within the cliff face itself. "On the plains below," Death said, "the Rivaiim once made their homes. Mostly, though not exclusively, within the shadow of the ridge line. They mined it for raw materials, back when anyone would actually want something dug from this world. This region we're looking over now is where the greatest number of them died. But some of them fell all throughout their territory, and we're going to have to scour every bit of it for signs of Belisatra's minions." "You're certain they'll come?" "Absolutely. Thanks to my carelessness, they know now that they require the blood of the Rivaiim to awaken the Grand Abominations. This is the only sizable source left in creation." War reached down, absently patting Ruin's neck. "But if they died here eons ago—" "I have means of drawing the essence from the earth, no matter how long or how widely dispersed, and reconstituting it. We have to assume the enemy can come up with their own methods." War dismounted and stepped to the very edge, struggling and failing to see any sign of the ground so far below. "If the enemy arrives before our own reinforcements do, we may be hard-pressed to locate them in this muck." "If your tactical concerns are our biggest problem, War, I'll be well pleased." Then, at his brother's furrowed brow, "My concern is that Hadrimon or Belisatra might have enough historical knowledge to realize that while this is the only substantial source of Rivaiim blood, there are a few others, small but viable. Anywhere the Rivaiim fell in significant numbers, and you may recall that the Nephilim did indeed battle some of them in other realms before we closed in on their own. It would only be enough to awaken a few of them, and only for a short while. Nevertheless, we need to prepare for the possibility that our enemies may arrive with one or more of the Grand Abominations fully empowered." War began walking the edge of the escarpment, looking for the best spot to climb down. He said nothing in response to that warning, and Death could hardly blame him. There was, really, precious little to say. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 19. And the nastiest planet I have ever heard of in all of fiction. This is what happens if you let a wall meat infestation run out of control. Honestly, I've been looking forward to sharing this grodiness with you guys since I started this project, so I'm rather looking forward to the comments on this one. But it still brings us to the end. So I'm BurningDogFace, and I'll see you on the next episode of Let's Read Darksiders, the Abomination Vault by Ari Marmel. Till then, have yourselves a great day, Burning Dog fans. Later!